So as we've been listening to this whole week, the theme has been the salt of the earth. God willing, tonight we're going to focus on a few verses from the book of Romans chapter 12. And the theme that I'd like to keep in mind tonight is, what does it mean to be a living sacrifice to God? So we'll start with Romans chapter 12, verse 1, which says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. So here St. Paul is making an appeal to the will, for us to make a decision on how we're going to live our lives. He's literally begging us to make the right choice about how we're going to live for Christ. So let's take a minute here and think about what St. Paul is saying. He's asking us to present your body as a living sacrifice. So what does it mean, your body? Is it just my physical body? Is it just my mind? Is it just my soul? Is it just my thoughts? Or is it everything? So St. Paul here is asking us to give everything that we have to the Lord. If you think about it, it's not really wise to separate ourselves into compartments, because if we're separated, how do we devote our lives to Christ? So let's think about, you make an order on Amazon. I don't know if this is a thing anymore, but it used to be where you can choose. Do you want to get the entire package all together, or do you want to get bits and pieces as they're ready? So if we take our lives in this manner and say, you know what, when this piece of my life is ready to go to Christ, I'll bring it. And when this piece is ready, I'm going to give it. Things can get lost that way. And if the whole package isn't going all at once, I think it's very difficult for us to present our full selves to Christ. So Christianity can't really function in a way where we say, I'm going to give this now and this later when I'm ready. You know, I might say that I'm ready to dedicate my family life to Christ, but not my life with my friends. Or I want to represent Christ when I'm among believers and among fellow churchgoers. When I'm in the midst of non-believers at work or school or any of that situation, it doesn't matter. Or I'll think about God only when I'm at church, but I don't need to think about him anywhere else. Instead of that, I'd like for us to think of our entire being, which is our body, our mind, and our soul, and everything that we have to be given to Christ all at once. Because if it's not, then we end up being lukewarm. And we know what God and what Christ says about being lukewarm in Revelations, and that's not something that I don't think any of us want to be, nobody wants to be spit out. St. John Chrysostom talks about how to be a living sacrifice, and he says, let your eyes not look at wickedness. Do not utter unclean words, so your tongue becomes an offering. By not practicing forbidden acts, your hands become a complete offering. But we also need to do good deeds. So if we only focus on what not to do, that's only half the picture. We can't stop there. We have to look at the next half, which is what we need to do in order to be a living sacrifice. So he goes on and says that the hands should offer alms. The mouth should bless opponents, and the hearing should find pleasure in the passages of the Holy Bible. So let's think for a minute, why might we want to keep certain parts for ourselves and other parts for God? And I think one of the reasons is that we tend to put our bodies in charge of our will and not the other way around. So what does that mean? We let our body dictate where we go, what we do, and what we say. So I want to eat this, or I want to be satisfied by this, or I want to be intoxicated. I want to be powerful. I want to be rich. The body wants, so the body gets. But unfortunately, this is not the way we should go, or we should be doing. Because the body is a great servant, but it's a terrible master. Let me say that again. The body is a great servant, but a terrible master. So if your body is in charge of what you're doing, unfortunately, it leads us to go astray. So let's not allow our impulses to rule our body. And let's allow Christ to be in charge. And let him direct our bodies and our minds and our soul where to go and what to do. And fasting is one of those great ways that we can subject our body to discipline so that we say to the body, you know what, you're not in charge right now. You don't matter right now. What matters is what can I do to sacrifice myself to God. You know, when we're fasting, it's not just, and we've heard this before, it's not just about a change in diet, because if it's just a change in diet, it doesn't accomplish much. It's a matter of, you know what, I really want to eat this, but I'm willing to give this up, even though it's temporary pleasure, because I want to make a sacrifice to God. And these are little things that we can do. I don't want to eat this chocolate bar. I don't want to eat this pizza, whatever it is. But it allows us to stop and think not of our physical body, not just of ourselves, but to think of God above and to think, what can I do? What little things can I do day to day to sacrifice to Him? So when St. Paul asks us to be a sacrifice, he asks us to be a living sacrifice. In the Old Testament, when the sacrifice was brought, it needed to be alive when it was brought to the altar. So, for example, let's take the lamb. The lamb was brought to the altar. The priest slayed it, and he burnt it. The lamb was dead. What's done is done. So the only requirement was that it needed to be alive when it got to the altar, but after that it wasn't. But St. Paul asks us to be a living sacrifice. So we're not being carried to the altar. We're not being dragged by anybody. And because we're alive, when we come to the altar, we can actually sneak off and leave if we really want to. And I think, myself first, we tend to bring ourselves and say, okay, I'm ready to give myself to Christ and to do everything for Christ, but then I slowly get off the table and leave, and then I come back again, and it's a vicious cycle. Thankfully, God is merciful, and He allows us to come back over and over and over, but we don't want to take advantage of God's mercy and His love. We want to be that sacrifice, and we want to be alive and living for that during that time that we're giving a sacrifice to God. So, if we sacrifice, little bits and not give everything, then we may be alive in the body, but we may be dead in the spirit. So we only, for example, serve when it's convenient, or we only love those who love us. But is that really sacrifice? Is that really offering ourselves to God? Or we only acknowledge God when life is going smooth and everything is happy-go-lucky and things are great. But then when times get rough, we walk away. So we're asked to offer ourselves daily to Christ and daily to God. And one of the things that we can do is at the end of each day is reflect on our day and think, how many things did I give to God today and how many things did I do for myself? And if the number is higher in the ladder for things for ourselves, then maybe the next day we need to think about how we want to do things and hopefully make the things that we give to God more priority than the things that we give to ourselves, so that ultimately we can give that sweet aroma to Christ that He wants us to be. So the hymn Tishori, which we sing during weekdays in liturgies and during fasts, describes St. Mary as the golden censer. And it says, the golden censer is the Virgin, her aroma is our Savior. And so what this means is that Christ is dwelling in her. And of course, He dwelt in her literally, but if she hadn't been prepared and ready when she got that Annunciation, I don't think Christ would have been able to dwell in her. And so some may ask, how do we know that St. Mary was ready? How do we know that she was well-versed? She didn't really say much in the Bible. She's not quoted very much. But in the little quotes that she does give, she really proves to us that not only did she love God, but she lived for God day by day. So let's take a passage from Luke chapter 1, verse 46. My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for He has been mindful of the humble state of His servant. From now on, all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is His name. And then she's going to go on and basically prove to us how much she knew about the law in the Old Testament. So she goes on and says, His mercy extends to those who fear Him from generation to generation. He has performed mighty deeds with His arms. He has scattered those who are proud in their inmost thoughts. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, even as he said to our fathers." So with those 5 or 6 sentences there, she sounds like a theologian. She sounds like someone who knows what she's talking about, because truly she is. And the only way that she was able to get to that point, even though she was a mere teenager when she was given the Annunciation, was that she dedicated her life as a living sacrifice day to day for God. She was able to realize the importance of God's word in her life and to be ingrained and to live his words day by day in order to get to that point where she was made worthy to carry Christ himself. So she accepted a challenge. She accepted something that was not easy. I would imagine that given how much she loved God and how much she knew about God, there must have been something inside of her that knew that, yes, a lot of glory was going to come from this, but also a lot of pain. And things were not going to be easy. Imagine a teenager being asked to carry, to be pregnant, and the physical and the mental toll that takes on a woman. Imagine the scrutiny that she had to deal with being an unmarried woman who was pregnant. In those times, if you were an unmarried woman who was pregnant, by law, you were supposed to be stoned to death. And I'm sure she knew that. And yet she accepted this annunciation from Archangel Gabriel. Being a follower of Christ came with persecution. And she had to deal with the pain of seeing her beloved son crucified on the cross for something that he didn't even do. And yet, despite all of this, she accepted what was asked of her and accepted to carry Christ. So are we willing to make little sacrifices day to day to allow Christ to be within us and for us to give our lives to him? It doesn't take as much as what St. Mary had to do. It's little by little that we need to do day by day. But if we don't start with little, then we won't get to the points where it's a lot. So the next thing that we learn from her is that she immediately accepted what was asked of her. She didn't say, you know what, give me 2 days to think about this. Give me 2. Accepted the words from Archangel Gabriel. And what did she say? She said, I will be the maidservant of the Lord. So this whole idea of let me wait until I can be a little better, let me wait till I'm older, is a trap. And it's a trap from the devil. It's the whole idea of you must be holy before you present yourself to the altar. But if you really think about it, we're not the ones who make ourselves holy to get to the altar. It's the altar itself. That's what makes us holy. So if we say to ourselves, we're going to wait and go there, or we're not going to give ourselves fully, how do we expect to be made holy by not going to the altar? The only holiness that we bring to the altar is a decision to be made holy. And then Christ takes over and does the rest. Our bodies go on this altar, and he takes away and burns away our impurities and our sins and sees our weakness and gives us the power to overcome anything that comes our way. So let's stop fooling ourselves and saying, let me enjoy this sin, you know what, one more time. It's not a big deal, just one more time. Or let me wait till I'm done my exams and then I'll start to, read the Bible and focus on God. Or let me wait till I'm married and then I'll dedicate more service to God and that kind of thing. Let's not wait. We don't know when our last day is going to be. And not only that, we don't know how many blessings we're missing out on by waiting. Every day that we dedicate our life to Christ, there are more blessings that are given to us. And we may not feel them, but it becomes more and more and more, and we basically give off these blessings to others. We may not see it in ourselves, but others can see it and others can feel it. So I was thinking about some of the reasons why we may want to delay. Why might we think to ourselves, you know what, I'm not ready, or I'm too young, or whatever it is. So some reasons that came to mind, first one being apathy. So I have a long life ahead of me. There's no need for me to do anything just yet. Or I'm too young. I haven't lived my life. I haven't had my fun yet. So what's the hurry? Or I come to church every Sunday and I take communion and I say my Our Father in the morning, so why is that not enough? Or maybe we've been praying for something and those prayers haven't been answered, and so we think to ourselves, God doesn't love me, so why should I offer anything to him? Or we're going through a difficult time, and during the difficult times we convince ourselves that we actually need to be further from God rather than closer to God. I'll never forget this. When a family member of mine was sick years ago, I became really, really angry with God, thinking, how this person has gone through enough. How could you do what you're doing to him? And unfortunately, I took the situation with anger, and every time I think back about it, I think to myself, man, I missed out on so many blessings. I missed out on so many opportunities to serve this person with love rather than to be angry and to think, God, why are you doing this to me? And who knows what I've missed out on? I'll never know. But I say this in hope that nobody else goes through what I went through, in the sense of feeling like you've missed out on something. And of course, God's going to give me more opportunities to gain more blessings, but what's gone is gone, and I don't want anybody else to get that feeling of missing blessings from God. Verse 2 in Romans chapter 12 says, "And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God." So if we want to be the salt of the earth and we want to add flavor to this world, we can't be like everybody else, because then we don't stand out. And we're not looking to stand out so that we can be prideful or we can, boast that, hey, I'm different. No, we want to stand out so that we can glorify God in everything that we do. The world is constantly telling us we need to follow the latest trends, we need to eat the most famous foods, we need to intoxicate ourselves, we need to look a certain way, we need to talk a certain way. And the world teaches us to focus on ourselves above all else. It's all about me, 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 me. How can I do things to make my life better? How can I do things to make myself more popular, more powerful, more rich? And this is all the world tricking us to conform to what we shouldn't be doing. Because truly we're called to be different. We're called to stand out. We're called to be vessels for God to be glorified. And so if you think about it, St. Mary did exactly that. St. Mary did not conform to the norms of the world, because if she did, there's no way she would have accepted what was to come to her when she accepted the Annunciation. So I think sometimes we get entrenched and we focus so much on all the good things that St. Mary did and all the praises that we sing for her. And and during the veneration and during the praises, there's so many amazing names and things that we call St. Mary. But I think sometimes we forget that it wasn't easy. It wasn't just take this and everything is going to be lovely and wonderful and there's never going to be a problem in life. No, that's not what happened with St. Mary. Like I talked about before, she was barely a teenager. And she was for sure going to be scrutinized by the community, and people would not want anything to do with her because they might be ashamed of her. But she didn't waver. She didn't delay. And she didn't say, I'm going to give a part of me to Christ. No, I'm going to give my all. I know what this means. I know that it's going to be a sacrifice, but I love God, and that takes precedence over everything. Imagine us as deacons if we were told that we have to wear our tunic everywhere we went. We would stand out like a sore thumb. Like we would be very obviously different from everybody else. I wonder how many of us would be okay with that. I wonder how many of us would be okay with the idea of, I'm going to wear this tunic to represent God everywhere I go, and I'm going to be different. But people are going to look at you funny, and people are going to ask you, what's this, and what are you doing, and all these things. I wonder how many of us would be okay with doing something like that. So ask yourself a question. When's the last time that you did something for God or for somebody else when it was not convenient to do so? when you had to sacrifice something, when you had to give up something in order to serve or to spend time with somebody who doesn't have any friends, or to, clean up the church, or to do something that is not part of your day-to-day, may not seem like fun, but it was for God. When's the last time that we did this out of an inconvenience and did it very, very willingly? So I think sometimes we're conditioned to convenience ourselves first, because we live and are ruled not just by our body, but by our feelings and our actions. So the verse doesn't say, be transformed by the renewing of your feelings or your actions. It says to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So what does that mean? So if I basically had my feelings or actions dictate everything that I do, then there would be no consistency. Because you know what? Today, I don't feel so good, so I don't feel like standing up to pray. And I might ask myself, you know what? How do I feel about church today? How do I feel about work today? How do I feel about my spouse today? So imagine that's how you lived your life and said, based on how I feel today, I'm going to treat this person nicely, or I'm going to do good to these people. But we're told to renew and be transformed by the renewing of our mind, so our thoughts. And so if we are consistent, and the only way to be consistent is if you're not dependent on your feelings. If I know that it's important for me to pray daily and to talk to God and to read His Word and to listen to His Word, it doesn't matter if that day I'm feeling tired, I've had a rough day at work. I know this is what my body and what my soul needs, so I'm going to do it. But if I was doing it based on how I feel that day, I think there would be a lot of days where we would skip out on these things. And there would be a lot of days where we just completely forget about Christ and completely forget about what we're asked to do. So let's focus on renewing our minds and not be so dependent on our feelings to dictate what I'm going to do today. So for example, if I'm praying and I don't feel like it, there's still benefit. There's still a benefit to stand up to pray, even if we don't understand 100% of the words, even if it's confusing, even if it feels like a chore. But it's still beneficial to stand up and pray and say, you know what, Lord, I'm going to stand up and pray. I don't understand this. I want you to teach me. I want you to help me understand. And I'm tired today and I'm lazy today, but I'm going to do it anyways. And it's important to read His Word, even if you don't understand everything that He's saying. But, I've been taught before that if you don't know how to pray, if you don't know how to read the Bible, just start somewhere. Just start. And in the beginning, it's going to be hard. In the beginning, you're not going to understand. But with time, as you do it more and as you allow it to be part of your everyday life, you will reap the benefits and you'll understand a lot more. So St. Mary's answer to Archangel Gabriel was an immediate, "Behold the maidservant of the Lord, let it be according to your will." Imagine if, and forgive me for saying this, but imagine if St. Mary that day wasn't feeling well. Imagine if she was having a rough day and she said, "Oh, you know what? Can you come back another time? Or can I think about this for a little bit?" But I don't think that's what she did. It didn't matter how she felt that day. It didn't matter what was going on. Her life was dedicated to Christ, and when she was asked to do something for Him, she immediately stepped up and said, "Yes, Lord, let me be your maidservant." Verse 3 in Romans 12 says, "For I say, through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, as God had dealt to each one a measure of faith. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion." If there's one person in this world who had every right to be prideful, it was St. Mary. She was given the task of being the mother of God. We like I said earlier, in the praises, we see how many wonderful and amazing names we give to her and the praises that we give to her. And yet, when she was given the task, she didn't say, "You know what? I'm going to be the mother of God. I'm going to be this amazing person, so everybody come and take care of me. I'm better than everybody. No, she did the opposite. She found out her cousin Elizabeth was pregnant, and she immediately got up and went to visit her. And it wasn't an easy journey. The Bible describes it as the hill country. So if you imagine, sometimes we're lazy to walk 10 minutes, and yet she walked miles and miles and miles. I'm not sure for how long, but over the hills, and she went and served her cousin, even though she was carrying God, even though she had the right to think, I'm better than everybody else, but that's not what St. Mary did. And when I think about this, I think about how many times I've become proud of something that I shouldn't even be proud of. We're given all these spiritual gifts, and we're given gifts in life. And the key is that these are gifts. These are not things that we made on our own or developed on our own. These are gifts from God. So it's kind of silly to think about, I'm going to show off, I'm going to be proud of a gift that I received. I'm going to be proud of something that was given to me. How does that work? You can't. It's not like you made this yourself out of scratch, from scratch. It's not like you developed this on your own. Everything that we're given, whether it's a talent to sing, a talent to speak, a talent to heal others, a talent to listen to others, whatever it is, we weren't given these from ourselves. These are all gifts that are from above. So let's do as the verse says, and not to think highly of ourselves, and not to think, the verse says, not to think highly of himself more highly than he ought to think. So with any blessing that we get, I hope that we can remember that these are all gifts, and I hope that we can learn from St. Mary that pride doesn't accomplish anything, and it's the opposite. It's God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. He has given us all these gifts so that we can serve his name. In this same chapter, it also talks about those who have different kinds of blessings. Teachings, exhortation, prophecy, service, encouragement. But it asks us that we do this all in one body. That we do this all for each other. And not to become prideful and to think that we're better than others. But in everything that we do, every encounter that we have, we remember that this is Christ standing in front of me. This is a representation of the Lord, a person who's made in his image, and to serve them and to love them and to treat them as if this was Christ himself. And if you're lacking in certain things, ask. Ask and you shall receive. And at the end of the day, we want to learn from St. Mary that what she said was, I want to magnify the Lord. I want everything that I'm doing to be for the glory of God. So in conclusion, we have 3 points that we talked about. One is to offer your body as a living sacrifice, and to do this daily, and to offer your whole self to God. Number 2 is do not be conformed to this world, but be the flavor that the world desperately needs. And then let everything that you do be done with love and not pride, so that your blessings may come from the Lord above. Glory be to God forever. Amen.